All right, guys, we're going to get started. It's Chris. Want to thank everyone for taking time to jump on tonight. Just want to have this quick call tonight. It'll be brief, just running through some things that we've seen, some observations down here in Florida and across the country, and just get everyone off to a good start here as we start the season up north. We're going to start with offensive and defensive conferences and talk about that for a couple seconds. Guys, when it comes to the conferences, let's make sure that we as partners are confirming and communicating the conferences with each other, making good eye contact with your partner. We've seen some guys out there at times that maybe aren't watching or not acknowledging when either the offense or defense are getting together. So let's make sure we just look at each other, confirm whether we do or do not have a conference. Base guys, if you're recording them, make sure we're on the same page with our plate guys. So making eye contact, making sure that we're on the same page, and then have accurate numbers when it comes to those conferences and recording them. And also in communicating to either the offense or defensive teams, whether it is or is not a conference. Some things we're seeing with defensive conferences, one situation in particular that we viewed is a catcher going to the mound after the pitcher has been replaced. Guys, this is not a charged conference, okay? So ideally you would have your catcher obviously on the mound when the coach comes out to make a change. You know, in a perfect world, that catcher is going to confirm with the pitcher what the signs are, go back, warm his pitcher up, and then we'll get rolling here. Unfortunately, we're seeing that's not happening. Catchers a few times have wanted to go back to the mound and speak with the pitcher. So if they do so, just make sure we do not charge them with a conference, okay? They're still able to do that. There's no 120 in that situation, okay? If a catcher wants to go to the mound to start an inning, guys, there's no penalty there as long as he returns within the 120. So if we know that we're getting close, and we'll talk about the 120 seconds here in a couple minutes, but if you've been communicating with your partner on the bases and he's letting you know we're close to the 120, you know, just communicate to the catcher, hey, you can go out there, but let's just make sure you're back. We don't want to charge you, obviously, for a violation, which would be a ball to the batter. One thing that I viewed, and I can speak really from my own experiences with offensive conferences, a lot of us, and really all of us over the years, when a coach comes out to the mound, I think all of our base umpires are keeping their eyes on that coach to see whether or not he's going to make a defensive change. And oftentimes we're kind of waiting, staring at him to see if he's going to do something. One thing that we certainly have to think about here is the first thing we should be looking at when that coach comes out is the runners on base, the base coaches, the bench, all of those things. We want to make sure that, you know, the runners are staying in base. The coaches aren't leaving their bench to go and talk to the third base coach. We just want to make sure we're aware of what the offense is doing and train ourselves to make sure we know the status of what the offense is doing. And then and only then, once they make a change, obviously, then those runners can leave bases, coaches come out, they can communicate without a trip. So just, I think, a change in what we have to look for out there in acknowledging what the offense is doing before we immediately look to the defense to see if they're going to make a change. And you know what? There may be some situations where, you know, the coach may give a signal to go to the pen and you didn't see it. Well, if that's because we're doing what we're supposed to do and watching the offense, then certainly we have no problem with that. So just maybe a change in what we're looking for. When it comes to the 120 seconds, let's make sure as plate umpires, and I've seen this quite often, that we're just looking out to the base umpires in between innings to confirm how much time is left. And as base umpires, we have to be given those signals to the plate guy when we hit the 90-second and the 105-second mark. So I know from personal experience, when we're getting close, that's another signal you can probably give to your plate guy, just to, you know, whether it's whatever your signal is, just to speed that up so we don't have any violations. Certainly we're not looking to call this. We're not looking to ignore it, but if we're communicating with pitchers, players, and obviously with the batters and getting them prepared and ready to hit, then we shouldn't really face any of these violations. But let's make sure that we have knowledge of where we are on the clock, and our base guys are just sending that information to the plate guy. Wind-up positions, guys, we're still seeing pitchers that are violating with their improper foot positioning. And let's talk about and think about what we can do to kind of work around that. I suggest you guys watch the pitcher when they're in warm-ups. The second they go onto that mound, take a look and see where their feet are. I mean, I think a lot of us are used to not maybe paying attention at that point. Once they go out, we're maybe getting ready to take plays at first, getting ready, getting warmed up, stretching. But if we keep our eyes on that pitcher, see what they're doing, we're going to know immediately whether or not they are legal. And what can we do after that? I can tell you that the one thing that's been successful for me, bless you, is sending the wing umpire, or as a wing umpire, sending either the first or third baseman out to that pitcher. Just communicating to him and say, hey, listen, you better tell your pitcher to score up a little bit. He's in a position right now which isn't legal. And as long as that infielder returns once again within the 120, then there's not going to be an issue. So it's just a way to, I guess, preventative umpiring is really the best route to take here. Like we do in many other cases, you can always speak to a base coach, deliver the message, as he goes back to the bench in the half inning. And honestly, guys, if you see something in warm-ups, I have no problem with you guys speaking with the pitcher yourself. I think it looks better for you to send one of the either the first or third baseman out to speak with him. But if it's just that bad, I think that especially early on, if we can correct some of these situations, that's probably the best route to go. And in speaking with coaches, I'm not really sure that they really want these to be enforced. They view this rule as something that isn't really significant, nor does it have much of a bearing on the game. So I'm pretty sure it would be well received if we can just go out there and try to prevent this situation from happening. And if there's anything we can do where we can prevent this pitcher from being illegal immediately and not have to call it once we get into the game, I think it just is better for all of us involved. Hit by pitch, guys, I can say across the country it's been kind of a hot topic and an issue. There's some videos out there, of umpires getting them right and wrong. And certainly, the evolution of this rule, it's been something that's been pretty difficult for a lot of people to understand and to judge as well. So I think really the best way to look at this is just try to judge the intent of the batter. Is he really trying to get hit by the pitch? Or what a lot of people are saying, is he trying to steal first base? Is he going up there with no intent to even swing the bat? He just wants to try to find a way to get to first. So if we see hit by pitch and we're not 100% sure that he's actually trying to get hit by the pitch or he's doing something in his body to try to get hit, then send him to first. I mean, let's not guess on this. If we're going to think about what the penalty is now, it's obviously we're keeping him there and it's a strike. So let's be sure if we're going to do that we're 100% sure that he actually tried to get hit by that pitch or try to do something with his body to try to do so. And if you're blocked, and I think we've talked about this before, and you just feel like you missed that critical element, you're not sure what the batter did on a hit by pitch, then let's train ourselves to look immediately at the base umpire in the middle and see if he's giving you some sort of a signal that he has something different. And if that's the case, let's get together. I mean, I think a lot of us have seen in the past through video, and a lot of umpires that were standing in the middle of the infield, we know that that's probably the best look. And we have to acknowledge as plate umpires that there's times that we just don't see it the way we would like to. Well, we don't want to guess on that, certainly because of that stiff penalty. Guys, one thing I do want to say is there is no such thing as calling it a ball and stay here. There's really two options here. You go to first base or you stay at the plate and a strike is called. So we've seen a couple situations where there's been it's a ball and stay here. That is no longer an option. So let's make sure we don't go that route. And like all plays, guys, when we're going to overturn a call, we have to make sure that someone on the field is 100% certain that your partner has missed one of those critical elements of the play. And then we have to be 100% certain that the information that we're going to give is going to correctly change that call. And then and only then do we change the call. So a lot of 100% here, guys. But when we feel like our partner may have missed something or we're positive there's something we can add to this, then that's when we get together, and that's when we're going to change this call. Okay, so we got to be 100%. As far as warnings go, guys, let's make sure in the process of warning somebody that word warning comes out. that we use that word warning. I know we've talked about in the past, try to avoid to knock it off, that's enough. But I know a lot of us have been doing this a very long time, and those things still kind of come out. So if you say it, trust. I don't want to hear that from guys, but if it comes out, then just make sure you follow it up with that's a warning after that. Let's get that warning in there so they know officially they have been warned. I've seen a bunch of ejection reports early on where some of those comments, that's enough, knock it off, are in there. And then you have to go back through the report and say, I warned him by saying this. When you say this is a warning, there's no mistaking that. Okay, it's out there. And obviously now when you have to check the box in your ejection report for that, you've done the proper thing. Now, one thing I will say, ball and strike warnings, guys, I do like that exact terminology. This is your ball strike warning. If you continue, you'll be done, or I will have to eject you. I think with a ball and strike warning, guys, let's be clear in what we're saying. So there's absolutely no confusion. You're getting a ball and strike warning. Okay, it's not just one specific thing. So you may have a pitching coach or somebody, or bench coach, a player, whoever it may pop off with a ball and strike. When you issue that warning, it's for everybody. If somebody speaks after that, then they've been warned and they will be ejected. We've had a couple situations early on here about sight and sound after an ejection. So let's make sure that after an ejection, that ejected individual they leave. Within that site, then that's when that sight and sound suspension is going to be applied. Okay, so let's not let guys hang around, whether it's behind the plate, in a press box, within sight. Let's make sure they get out of there. And if they want to take a shot at you, they want to make some comments, then, don't. One thing, guys, West, like in the Northeast, let's just do our jobs and work really hard to make sure that you keep your blocks current and up to date. Alex and I have a ton of emails. Yes, I've just been handed a note. Please no text messages. I think we've said this a million times, but scheduling issues on a daily basis, and we're not going to remember and every close date that we receive through an email, and certainly when you factor in a text on top of that. So send emails. We're checking emails throughout the day. But if you email us a day or two or a week beforehand, don't expect us to remember that you can no longer work on Tuesdays, okay? So go into the Arbor, make sure you block those dates off. Follow that email up by just doing it. Because, when things get busy and we're looking for guys to work games and trying to fill slots, we may not remember that available on this day. So please just follow. And that being said, with all of the other issues that hopefully we don't have to look into, let's just make sure that you guys are checking your schedules and logging into the Arbiter in the morning, maybe throughout the day and certainly at night, because a lot of times we're evaluations, and I've been spending time even today looking and reading some of those, and we had over 1,000 or 3,000, done last year, and it's very helpful to gauge how all of you are doing on the field. So let's just continue with that process throughout this year. Get those in there. A lot of them obviously are just number evaluations. Please, if you have the time, take the time to put some comments about your partner. Certainly it's not saying bad about him. It's not going behind his back. It's useful, and it helps me. And certainly if we see issues or I see issues, Alex sees issues that we have to talk about with guys, we're not going to speak in specifics where you guys are going to be thrown under the bus here. So we use those evaluations. They're very helpful, and certainly just continue to follow through with those. I do know, or I've heard that there's an arbiter issue where some umpires are having to fill out 2 evaluations. So we'll look into that and try to figure out what exactly is going on. But like I said, please take the time to do that for us. I'm going to hand the phone over to Danny here, and he's going to talk to you about some videos and plays and stuff.
Good evening, guys. I will be brief. A lot of what Chris has discussed tonight, I had mentioned in I guess it was the middle of February conference call, that the Coach's Corner would have a lot of content programmed related to the new rules, the hit by pitch, obstruction, pace of play, things along those lines. Since then, with the help of Jim Clayton, that section on our website, the Coach's Corner, has been programmed. And I've had a number of umpires who are in Florida working RustMat who took the time and have come up to me individually, and I guess a couple collectively, that just mentioned that they took the time, they looked at it, and they said it was very helpful. So for anybody on the phone, and I know you're all busy, I know you all have jobs and other responsibilities, if you can take some time, just invest it in looking at some of the content on there, it will certainly help. You know, from what I've heard and even just doing it myself, I think it's been very helpful for me. So I would surmise that it would be helpful for anybody that really can take a few minutes and just try to really understand what we're trying to convey. And what we're really trying to do is to make it as uniform as possible in terms of application on the field. Once again, I say this every conference call as we begin the year. If you have any plays, send me the email, dmiller@umpires.org. Anything that can be helpful from a teaching point, something that's interesting that other people may want to see, things that people can learn from, just send me the email. And in closing, for the three-man umpires on the call who are working three-man, who are working towards three-man, starting in April, Monday through Friday, we will have a video mechanics series throughout the entire month, comprised of video from the clinics this past year. If there's any questions for me, just shoot me an email at any point in time, and I will answer them. And once again, any plays, just send them my way. Thanks, guys.
Hey, guys, it's Alex. Actually, while the call was going on, received a couple emails here just regarding the hit by pitch and how we go about getting together on that. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly. This is not a situation where Chris or I feel that the base umpire should be coming in unsolicited. So basically the mechanics of this will look something like this, and it's probably hard to envision, but if I'm working the bases and I have a situation where I think there's some information related to a hit by pitch that my partner might need, we're kind of in that same situation that we used to be in terms of getting your partner's attention, the plate guy's attention, either with a hat off or something of that nature. We have an added complication in terms of this play in that we can get together for help, and also in all the instant replay conferences, this is a reviewable play. But the rule book right now has us in a spot where hit by pitch is being treated the same as balls and strikes, which means you can't leave your position to argue it. So, that puts us in kind of a bind a little bit. So if we have a situation where very briefly someone comes out of the dugout and, says, hey, can you get together? And you're willing to do that, then let's just go ahead and do that. And if we feel it's appropriate. If not, if we don't feel it's appropriate and we're 100% confident in that call, we need to instruct whoever's come out that, you can't be out here to argue a hit by pitch. You have to go back to the dugout. That's a very, very brief interaction that obviously we have to have if there's a chance that we're going to get together. But we shouldn't be having extended discussions about hit by pitch, because the way the rule's currently written, that is not something that someone can leave their position to question or argue. So you guys got to be honest with yourselves. I mean, there's a lot of times on hit by pitch that we get blocked out. A catcher gets up, we don't see something, we miss something, batter's arm. You just have to be honest with yourself. And if it's a situation where you feel like one or both of your base umpires, depending on, what kind of game you're working, might have some information for you, get together, do it quickly. And kind of as Chris said, if you have 100% certainty that something was missed and we can change it, let's go ahead and change it and use all of our protocols. But again, just want to make sure this is not a situation where the base umpire should be, coming in unsolicited to say, hey, he leaned in or something like that. That's not appropriate in this situation. But certainly if we do need to get together and we feel like we can flip it, that's something that we certainly can do. So, Chris, any other thoughts on that?
No, Alex, I'm glad you brought that up because we don't want there to be any confusion here, and we certainly don't want guys that just jump into a situation and essentially overrule the way that's going to play out and look. It's just not going to look good. And when it comes to, like Alex said, we know that the coach cannot argue this. He can't come out to argue. But let's not just be the umpire. I know I've talked about this before, just to put up the hand, the red flag, and say, no, you can't say anything on this. If there's a legitimate question, then answer it briefly, and if he starts to come up, then advise him that he can't come out and argue it. But one of those questions might be, and especially if we put the hand up right away, one of those questions might be, Chris, can you ask for help on that? If we just dismiss him immediately, we haven't even given him the opportunity to ask if we can get help on that. And that might be a situation where you're like in your head, you know what, maybe I didn't see that, or I may have missed something, or maybe my partner is walking towards me in the bases and I think he has something to help me with. So let's just go through that process. Don't dismiss the coach immediately if he's being respectful, and then follow through the process. And if we have to flip it like Alex said, then, to get it right, we're going to do that. That's what we are suggesting to you guys. So, guys, in closing, one more.
Yeah, guys, one more thing. Chris and Danny and I have been down at RussMat here in Florida, and over the course of a month, been dealing with somewhere around 1,000 games. So we've seen probably as much baseball in the last 30 days as we'll probably see all year. And one of the things that I just wanted to point out as Chris started to talk about sight and sound and things of that nature, we're seeing a ton of ejections down here. They're not all Northeast ejections, so there's a lot of umpires that we're unfamiliar with or haven't been through a lot of our conference calls and our training. But it's really important if you have a situation in a game where someone is going to get a suspension for something other than just what the rule book says. So I'm not talking about necessarily the one game for players or assistant coaches. I mean, obviously we need to notify the head coach about that, but more importantly than that, because those in particular are rule book very specific. But if you get someone for contact, sight and sound, prolonged, all of those type of suspensions, they need to be noted as they happen. So if somebody makes contact with you and you're going to write it up as physical contact, you need to say that as it happens. And certainly tell team management, or if it wasn't the head coach who made the contact, you need to tell that head coach when everything calms down that there was contact during this ejection and there will be a suspension. Same thing with sight and sound. We had a situation yesterday where we heard nothing about sight and sound on the field. We heard nothing about a suspension in a phone call. And then when we get the report, there's sight and sound has been written up. And that type of suspension issuing without notifying somebody on the field, it's very difficult for Chris and I and the national coordinators at all the different levels to justify those suspensions when the first we're hearing about it is 12 hours after the game. So if you have any of these additional suspensions, just make sure, please, on the field that you're letting someone know that it's a sight and sound, or it's a physical contact, or it's a prolonged, whatever. Those are the three big ones, I think. Just make sure that we're doing that, because we want to have a trail and a story during the course of our ejection so that the report reads and writes properly, and that everybody along the way, from Chris and I all the way up to the national guys, can support it, justify it, et cetera. So just remember to be doing that. I hope people don't have those situations often, but if we do, we need to try to handle them properly And the last thing on that is, if you do have an ejection that carries a suspension like that, Chris and I will be very involved in the writing of that report with you guys. Anytime there's an additional or an egregious suspension like that, we'll want to make sure that we work with you on how to write it so that everything, falls in line, is copacetic, because obviously that ejection report will be coming under some scrutiny. So, but that's really all I've got for tonight. So, Chris, I'll let you close it out.
Hey, guys, one other thing about suspensions, and we all know that the chart exists in the rule book, and certainly, we should know what the suspensions are. But if you don't, you just have to alert them that there is a suspension. So if you don't remember the exact number of games when the suspension, the ejection occurs on the field, alert somebody on that team, some team personnel, that there will be suspension. Because obviously when you file that report, it's going to ask you that question, was somebody notified? And it's very difficult, and we've had to deal with this down here when people aren't notified, and now we have to go through the channels of trying to notify people, oftentimes very late at night. And we don't want a team, a conference, or anyone to find out the next day that there's a suspension. We want to be able to deliver that information as soon as we possibly can. So with that, guys, thank you for your time tonight. Certainly this phone call is just to get us prepared and ready for and amped up for the season to start up in the Northeast. And certainly any questions that you have for Alex and I, you can reach us offline. And let's get going on the right foot here, guys. And thanks again for being on the call tonight. We'll talk to you all soon. Good night.